Today I'm going to focus only on 5 key findings and actionable recommendations that are based on our analysis of county-wide data. I'll not be covering any results from any specific agencies. It's important to understand that even after 2 years of trying, we still have an incomplete picture regarding some of the most critical factors relating to racial equity and police accountability. Most importantly, we have very little data regarding complaints against police, traffic stops and other citations, and use of force incidents. 5 departments gave us little, if any, of the information we requested. Others provided much more, but in these most critical areas, many departments stated that the information didn't exist, wasn't accessible, or was exempt from release under the Open Records statute. And more agencies simply ignored these requests. The following chart clearly shows where we lack adequate information to track policing activity relevant to racial equity and accountability. This summary graph shows how many of the 39 departments provided information responsive to the most important items in our written requests for information. Most of the graphs we'll use today use a common color code. Green is good, red is bad, yellow is in between. Blue means that we didn't receive any information, and purple means that an item is not applicable to specific departments. Since this graph is about compliance with requests for data, red specifically shows where requests were officially denied in writing. It's easy to see where we have significant gaps in the data. Look where we have the least green. Information about complaints against police, traffic stops and other citations, and use of force data. In some cases, the yellow partial score reflects departments who did not capture the race of the suspect in their internal reports. The first line, arrest data, is all green because we were able to download uniform crime reporting data from the PA State Police, not because every local agency responded. So let's look at the arrest data by race and put it in context. For the county as a whole, the black population is right about 4%. That's the blue bar. It's based on data from the 2020 census. The red bar shows that 18.6% of arrests from 2014 through 2021 involved African American subjects, 4.6 times their population percentage. That ratio is how we measure disproportionality in enforcement. It does not imply any specific cause for that disproportionality. When we zoom out to the state level, we see that the data has the same shape. Arrests are disproportionate to population, but the ratio shows less disproportionality than in Bucks County. Zooming out again to the national level, it's a similar story. Arrests are disproportionate, but a little less so than in Pennsylvania, and only half as disproportionate as Bucks. So let's drill down on Bucks County and look at other types of enforcement. The blue horizontal line shows the African American population baseline. Then, going from left to right, we have the percentages of arrests, traffic stops, and use of force incidents involving black subjects. We see disproportionality across all three, although many of the departments did not provide data for traffic stops and use of force. We have enough data on these to raise questions, but it's far from complete. It's important to note that the Police Chiefs Association does not believe that comparing enforcement percentages to local population demographics is a valid measurement of policing bias. To address this, the NAACP and the association agreed to work together to define analytical methods to assess enforcement equity. This subcommittee met only once to discuss scope and goals. Despite numerous requests from the NAACP to schedule follow-up meetings, the police kept delaying, and after a year, a second meeting was never scheduled. Our recommendations are summarized in the next slide. Here are the key points. Requiring the collection of the subject's race for use of force incidents, traffic stops, and other citations, maintaining this data in a centralized database, and publishing regular reports on key data while protecting identities as appropriate. Now, in the time since our initial data was collected, some small steps have been taken to improve the capture of race information on use of force incidents. Much more is required. The PA State Police have mandated that all agencies provide regular reporting, including the subject's race, of use of force incidents involving death, serious bodily injury, or discharge of a firearm. Reporting is not currently required when other use of force levels are applied, such as tasers, pepper spray, less lethal weapons, canine dogs, batons, or empty hand techniques. Collection of race information on traffic stops and citations is currently not required for municipal agencies. Most importantly, there are currently no plans to provide public access to the data collected on use of force incidents, traffic stops, or other citations. Our position is that public reporting of statistical data on all forms of enforcement with agreed metrics is essential for transparency and for continuous improvement. Our next finding relates to use of force policies. In 2020, after the George Floyd murder, the District Attorney and the Police Chiefs Association publicly announced that all 39 municipal agencies had agreed to implement 15 common principles in their use of force policies. We asked to see the policies. Unfortunately, we found that only 21 departments had actually incorporated all 15 principles into their policies. In early 2023, the NAACP team worked with each non-compliant department to address their policy shortcomings. Current compliance levels are shown in the following chart. 7 departments provided updated policies that are fully compliant with the Police Chiefs Association guidelines, bringing the total number of compliant agencies to 28. 2 departments never provided any copy of their use of force policies for evaluation. 9 have either failed to fully implement all the 15 points or did not provide updated policies for reassessment. Our recommendation is clear. All departments should immediately take steps to comply with the Police Chiefs Association guidelines by summer 2024. We also suggest that the DA's office and the association leadership should have a role in verifying compliance. The next finding relates to collective bargaining agreements for police officers. National policing reform groups have identified union contracts as a major factor limiting the accountability of police officers for potential misconduct. The NAACP team evaluated collective bargaining agreements to determine if they include any of the following provisions: disqualifying misconduct complaints, for example, throwing out complaints that aren't reported or investigated within an arbitrary time period; preventing the questioning of officers immediately after being involved in an incident, or otherwise restricting how, when, or where officers can be questioned; giving accused officers access to information that civilians do not get prior to being interrogated, for example, providing the names of accusers, body camera footage, or other evidence; requiring communities to pay costs. This could include giving officers paid leave while under investigation, paying legal fees, and paying the cost of settlements for misconduct lawsuits without clawback provisions in case of actual misconduct; purging records of police misconduct every few years or blocking misconduct from being recorded in an officer's disciplinary file; or limiting the consequences for approving misconduct or restricting the capacity of civilian oversight structures for the media to hold police accountable. This chart shows how the 39 municipal agencies stacked up. 5 got a good score, the green, where none of the troubling provisions were found in the contracts submitted for review. 10 got a bad score, that's the red. 17 received an in-between rating. Those are shown in yellow. 2 refused to provide contracts for review, and 5 did not have collective bargaining agreements. Our recommendation is to establish minimum standards for police union collective bargaining agreements that eliminate the kinds of loopholes that limit accountability for misconduct. Now, this one was a particularly disappointing area in our investigation. The majority of agencies were not forthcoming with any information about complaints. Some cited an extremely broad open records exemption regarding records that relate to an investigation. We countered by asking for summary, anonymized information, but still without anything. Our position is that understanding the number and type of complaints and the demographics of the residents who file them are matters of critical public interest and integral to maintaining the level of transparency required to maintain public trust in policing. Lack of accurate information regarding complaints can be largely due to barriers to reporting police misconduct. These can include lack of information on how complaints can be raised or fear of appearing in person to do so. Our assessment criteria include the following. Is there information on municipal websites or social media on how to make a complaint about police? Are residents able to file a complaint without coming into the station? Is there a process for handling anonymous complaints? Do agencies review complaints that are transmitted by third-party agencies, such as community organizations or civilian oversight bodies? Are officers required to give civilians written information like their name, badge number, and reason for the stop, with instructions for providing feedback regarding the interaction? This last item is the gold standard. Residents can be nervous or distracted during a police interaction and unable to capture key details like the officer's name or badge number. When the NAACP receives complaints about police interactions, the person often does not even know the jurisdiction where the officer serves. It's really easy to get this wrong, and it makes it impossible to enter a complaint to the correct agency. Citizen contact receipts have increasingly been included in DOJ consent decrees for agencies involved in investigations of policing bias, but it can be as simple as having business cards for officers with the space on the back to fill in the reason for the interaction. In our metrics, we gave a positive rating if 4 out of 5 were in place. Now, this chart shows that 10 agencies fully met 4 of the 5 criteria. None met all 5. The rest received a rating of incomplete. Now, on a positive note, during our interactions, several chiefs agreed to add information on their websites or social media to inform residents on how to submit a complaint for review. These statistics were updated to reflect these positive changes, but it's clearly a major area where additional improvements are called for. Our recommendation is to adopt minimum standards aimed at eliminating barriers for residents to report police misconduct. This should include public reporting of key data about complaints, like their number, type, and resolution, while protecting identities as appropriate. The last of the key findings I'll present today involves community representation. This assessment sought to measure the extent to which the racial makeup of individual departments is proportional to the demographics of the community they serve. Information was gathered through interviews with police chiefs and compared to data from the 2020 U.S. Census, with a particular focus on African American representation. Our findings were that 27 agencies did not have African American officers proportional to their local population. Chiefs cite a lack of qualified applicants. It's important to note that demographic proportionality is difficult for very small agencies to achieve. And anecdotally, we're given to understand that the overall applicant pool of all races has been shrinking in recent years. Our recommendation is to establish a countywide program to promote and track progress toward improving the representation of communities of color in municipal police departments. This is the last of the key findings we'll review today. There are many more details in our report and its appendices. We tried to be comprehensive and completely transparent regarding our process. We hope you read it and that it will provide a useful guide to implementing some much needed changes.